So now that we start playing the game, it's actually quite simple. You have an overlying map with areas that you can go to. You select an area which brings you to the core gameplay, which is side-scrolling action like in Zelda 2. Once you complete an area, a new one is unlocked. Some areas require items for completion, so there is some backtracking. Okay, fair enough. So we get into the core gameplay and a multitude of problems become abundantly clear. The first and most glaring problem is, you guessed it, the control. And if you didn't watch the tutorial, you'd wonder if your controller was fucked. Again, you have to press up to jump, and with many of these jumps, you have to be spot on or you're dead. You can't use items while ducking because of this stupid control scheme. This can be a real problem when you can't engage an enemy while standing. The control in this game is just unbelievably frustrating, but the problems don't stop there. Naturally, you'll play through the game not knowing what to do, only to get ass raped over and over. And eventually, you will encounter these enemies that are immune to your sword, and you can't progress. And you're going to be thinking, okay, how do I pass this? This game, it suffers from the same problem as Deadly Towers. You start the game off too weak. So it turns out that you have to use snowballs to kill these Triceratops, which in turn drop firestones, which in turn kill the snow monkeys. It's kind of like the elemental schemes you find in many RPGs. Another problem with this game is that there's no invincibility buffer. In many games, when you get hit, there's a brief period where you are invincible and can't take any damage. But here, no. There's no buffer, which means you take damage and more damage and can get killed very easily. The shield offers very little protection. You have to come to a complete stop for it to block anything, and half the time, it's absolutely useless. Projectiles can come at you from any angle, and the shield will only block things that would hit you in the torso, and half the time, that doesn't even work. In Zelda 2, attacks were easily blocked as you just had to stand or duck to block, but here, no. And since Link is so slow, dodging simply isn't possible. The absolute worst thing about it is when you're standing on a raft, completely exposed, and when you're in this situation, well, you just have to hope that maybe, just maybe, you can take enough hits to make it through. The graphics just suck, the animation is all choppy, and the backgrounds are these hand-drawn pieces of shit. I knew people in middle school who can draw better than this. The problem with these backgrounds is that it's not always obvious what you can walk or jump on, and this can especially be annoying when you climb up a stage by jumping. And the shitty controls, they certainly don't help. One thing that is really annoying are these dark areas. In previous Zelda games, dark areas can be lit with a candle. In this game, you get a lantern, and once you enter a dark room, you use the lantern to lighten the room. Sounds simple. The only problem is, the effect only lasts a short while, meaning you have to constantly reuse the lantern to relight the room. In addition, the lantern uses oil, which is a consumable, and if you don't stock up enough, you're fucked. Later on, you encounter Magic Man on the flying carpet, where he informs you that Zelda has been kidnapped. Well, somehow Link already knew that. So, the opening cutscene tells us that this game is about battling Ganon's minions on Korodai, with Zelda prominently featured. Then Link says, let's go find Zelda, at the end of the tutorial. And now, just now, we learn that Ganon kidnapped Zelda. Wow. The boss fights in this game are an absolute joke, and don't require any sort of skill to defeat. It all boils down to having enough life to survive the onslaught, and then simply pounding away, or killing them with an item in one hit. Even after all these problems, the absolute most annoying thing about this game is derived from the fucking control. Often, you will go through a door and see that the room is dark, or that there is an enemy right there in your face. Your initial reaction will be to duck and go to the menu, or use an item, but what happens? Since button 2 does, well, everything, you will see that you will immediately go right back through the door that you came from. So what do you have to do? You have to go back through the door and then walk away from the door and then access the menu. You never get used to this. You go through the door and your gaming instincts take over, wanting you to go to the menu immediately. But no, instead of the menu, you go back through the door. This shit happens again and again and again and again, over and over and over. Why did they have to set up the control this way? Why couldn't we have up to go through a door, 2 to jump, and 3 to use items and go to the menu? Or why couldn't there be a start button? Who designs a system without a start button? A 4th generation system, no less. This ain't the Atari 2600. Even the 5200 had a pause button. It's complete and utter bullshit to make a CD-based system with no start button. Even without the fucking start button, I could have made a better control scheme. But no, they have one button to stab, one to do everything else, but what does this third button do? Not a goddamn thing! Alright, the last thing worth mentioning is the ending. You encounter Ganon and he turns out to be an easy one-hit kill. You pull out your book of Korodai and toss it and there you go, you've won. It kinda reminds me of Heroes of the Lance, another shitty game with a one-hit final boss. So you've rescued Zelda and fly off and she still refuses to kiss him. You know you have a shitty ending when you can't even score with the girl you just rescued. I know Blade and Striker from Bad Dudes rescued a man, but at least they got hamburgers. Poor Link here didn't get shit. So there you have it, Link the Faces of Evil. Shitty graphics, shitty gameplay, and some of the worst fucking controls in a video game ever. You start the game off too weak, you get no invincibility buffer, and this horrible game is just almost unplayable. This pathetic excuse for a game is a complete train wreck, with absolutely no redeeming qualities whatsoever. And after suffering through this abomination from start to finish, I can now honestly see why Nintendo pretends that this game doesn't even exist. And I, quite frankly, think that the rest of us should do exactly the same. That concludes this presentation. Join us next time for part 4 as we have a look at our second game in the Unholy Triforce, Zelda: The Wand of Gamelon.